Welcome to Coffee and Conversation. This is a groundbreaking episode. It's an episode we've never done before, a topic we've never covered. So you definitely want to lean in. You are in for a treat. I'm your host, Eric Twiggs, and today we're going to be talking about securing your digital future, insights from cybersecurity experts. We've got two cybersecurity experts that are joining us for a panel discussion on everything cybersecurity related. And here is really the theme of our episode today. And here it is. It's easier to prevent something from happening in the first place than to repair the damage after the fact. Just really keep that in mind. So we want to help prevent something. That's one of the main goals and themes of this episode. So make sure you lean in, you take notes. This is going to be fantastic. So I'm going to turn it over right now to my fellow hosts to introduce themselves. It'll be Dr. Sharon and Ted. So Dr. Sharon, take it away.
Great morning, everyone. Dr. Sharon H. Porter, Vice President of Media and Communications for WNM, and also Editor-in-Chief of Vision and Purpose Lifestyle Magazine.
Fantastic. All right. Good morning, Dr. Sharon and Ted.
Ted Fells, Vice President of Strategy for WNM and also President and CEO of Nucor Vision Incorporated.
All right. Thank you, Ted. Janelle.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. My name is Janelle Taylor, CEO and founder of the JTOA Corporation, where we optimize people, performance, and products. And it is such an honor to be here today on this panel and with our amazing hosts.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Thank you. And I am Eric Twiggs, and I'm President and CEO of WNM Ventures, and I'm also your procrastination prevention partner. All right. So now let's introduce our illustrious panelists. So we have Jennifer Franks and we have Ashley Monraj. They're cybersecurity experts. So we'll start with Jennifer. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself, about your background, and what you do in the field of cybersecurity?
So good morning. Thanks for having me. My name is Jennifer Franks, and I work at the U.S. Government Accountability Office. And I've been with the government for a little over 18 years now. And in my role, I serve as the director for the Center for Enhanced Cybersecurity. And in that role, I serve two different missions for the organization. One, we get our requests, we get legislative mandates from the U.S. Congress, where we go into federal agencies and we look at, from my perspective of the teams, we look at how they are enhancing the protections for cybersecurity. So my teams concentrate on safeguarding data and looking at their information security systems, which now also includes artificial intelligence systems and in the future, post-quantum photography. Next, I do have on-prem responsibilities for the agency. My teams are at the front and center of incident response and digital forensics. I operate a data center for the organization. My teams are at the front and center of migrating most of our systems into the cloud. We're actively invested in the Security Operations Center for our organization and all things cloud management and digital services for the enterprise. So happy to be with you to talk to you all about cybersecurity. My degrees are in cyber, so I really have been invested in all things in this realm for quite some time.
Excellent. Good morning, Jennifer. Thank you for sharing that. Ashley?
Absolutely.
So I'm a computer engineer by degree and did quite a bit of security earlier in my career and was working for consulting for tons of groups from governments to lottery corporations for security implementations, focusing on actual pen tests and testing in practical terms. And then a few years ago, 7 years ago, moved away to have my own groups to implement it using the best possible methods and leverage more automation rather than opinions and processes. And so rather than try to, for example, get people to understand everything, we want to abstract it to only allow them to see what they want, for example, to communicate between each other, but not how it actually does it. And we we were doing a lot of venture building, and so we've been focusing on completely transforming, and that's how we gain experience. And we've ended up building kind of a tool, a new generation tool that people are now calling platform engineering, that automates almost all base ground operations, do not have humans in the deployment or cluster access. Specifically now for Google Cloud, and we're looking in others. And that product is probably going to call InfraStream and be released sometimes next year, but we're leveraging it internally for digital transformations. And that's how we have a lot of expertise in the practical term of security, is by actually implementing and automating it at scale to be, multiple business lines for any medium-sized corporation. We don't do huge on-premise work yet, but it aims to almost do everything a group needs to be in cloud native and properly do the networking, properly do the projects, properly do a kind of everything we're supposed to do, and propose a solution instead of saying, hey, let's consult to do your work. We don't think that's necessary as much if you automate most of the concerns to serve most of the use cases.
Great. Okay. Good morning and welcome. Yeah, this is going to be exciting. Let's get this started with the current threat landscape. I don't think a lot of people who are leading organizations and a lot of entrepreneurs really realize the threat that this poses to what they're doing. So the first question, and we'll start with you, Jennifer. What do you see as the most significant cybersecurity threats that businesses and individuals face today?
That's a good question. I think it's the lack of knowledge of the end user. And I say that because my own sister is a business owner. She's an entrepreneur, but she's a doctor of physical therapy, right? She's built her own website. She has a practice, and she has employees working for her. But their knowledge base isn't cyber. They're not computer specialists, and their wherewithal in this area only goes so far. So she has to contract out to other services to provide intricate details about how to protect the security controls of her site. They don't do management of data, purchases and acquisitions going in and out of her enterprise of her site. But what if she did? So there's a lot of businesses out there that are e-commerce trading, and you're having individuals purchase things from your website. But when you do that, you're opening up your business, your enterprise, for all types of vulnerabilities. I remember back being in college, one of the things I was doing, we were starting to do this bust, and I'm not trying to give away my age, but we were starting to shop online, right? And we were, I invested in writing privacy policies for website, that fine print that none of us tend to ever read these days. But that's what I was doing back in college. We were writing privacy policies for website so people can know, how our information is being stored in the cookies and the cache on these websites, and what the third-party assessors are doing with our information, how they're managing it or not, and how they're adding additional security controls, or are they selling the data, and all those types of things. So now, advancing almost 20 years later, how this security is not being managed appropriately. Every single day we're being hit with new vulnerabilities from around the globe. And oftentimes these other countries are doing so in a little bit of advance than what the United States is doing. So when we're starting our businesses and we're building our websites and we're wanting to have services for our customers, we have to think about how we're going to protect the data. And when wanting to make sure that our customers' information is secure, so that they can trust that their data, their information is not being compromised by the malicious intruder.
Yeah, that's very interesting. You say the lack of knowledge. It really boils down to the lack of knowledge of the end user. It's been said that people are destroyed by the lack of knowledge. So
yeah, it's a big culture and education. Oftentimes, and I have friends and family who are always bogged down with, I got to take the security awareness training. And no one understands. It's annoying. You got to click through it and take the test. But there's a benefit to understanding why we ask you to do the security awareness training. and to be really cognizant and knowledgeable about what it brings to your organization. You as an individual can be targeted. And if you click on those links, those phishing links, or, oftentimes earlier this year, all of us were getting those text messages sent to us saying that UPS package was unsuccessfully delivered, and they wanted you to put in some additional information with your credit card and some other information to validate that package needs to come to where it needs to go to. That was a phishing campaign. And a lot of people were falling victim to that. And when that happens in an organization, that can lead to catastrophic impact to the data, to your business services. And if you're a small business, bringing down your critical mission services, even for a day or 2 days or a week or however, that can mean a lot of money and impact to your enterprise. So you have to look at those things. So it comes from the culture and the education of the end user.
I want to ask a question, Jennifer, about what you a large 9-to-5 organization. What you said actually happened to the organization last year. And after the major security breach, the technology team began to throw out test phishing emails, even after telling people not to click on, and they were still clicking on it on these So fortunately, they were just testing us, but people were still failing in droves. That awareness piece is huge.
Yeah, it's definitely the awareness piece. And I love a good test, love a good phishing test. And the best phishing test that I've seen from organizations is once we send out those test links and the teams fail, it's an educational piece, additional education layer. We send you back to a little test, a little training. Even if it's like a 15-minute, let me remind you, refresh your memory because you clicked on the link. Let me show you what this could have done had this been for real. And not to scare you, not to alarm you, but essentially to just make you more aware of the catastrophic impact this could have had. But it's useful for people to understand how this can impact business services.
Yeah, we were talking backstage. I mean, Janelle and I were talking backstage, and for a lot of business owners, this isn't even on their radar or they don't really see this as a threat. I know I had a business owner I used to coach years ago, and he clicked on a zip file, and literally money started coming out of his bank account, like down to zero. He literally almost lost his business because he clicked on a zip file, and it just took months and months of going through different things to repair the damage that was done. So if this isn't on your radar as a business owner, as a leader, please put it on today.
Absolutely.
This is critical.
And
It is.
unfortunately, the banks used to be really good with working with customers. I've heard there are different banks that are better. I won't name names, but there are different banks out there that are better at working with customers who have fallen victim to these types of identity theft type of situations. But some of them are siding with the situation that you should have known better. And they're, waiting till the investigation ends before they give you back your money. Some of them, and then helping you through the investigation, which may help you, especially if you're a small business, you need your funds to just maintain your business, pay yourself and your employees and such. But if you're having to wait until an investigation is over and the bank is taking months, that could cripple you. It could put you out of business. So, you do have to look at certain things. Now, the banks are definitely FDIC insured, but they're going to look out for themselves and their enterprise first, because they're going to ask you, did you click on something? Did you? Because essentially you gave the right of way to that user to do what they then did.
All right. Then Ted, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that training piece is so important. But then also, coupled with what enterprise solutions too, right? Of how you're going to secure things, because your people out there, they're going to, all the training in the world, from time to time, someone's going to do something, and those solutions that you have out there to kind of protect them from from themselves are really critical. I mean, are there any of those types of solutions that you can, that you all would like to speak on, maybe Ash.
Yeah. So I think we should try to simplify things for end users. And what does that mean? Using SSOs like, authenticate with Google, authenticate with Meta, authenticate with your corporation SSO. That really helps. Less password. And that's one. So as much as possible, a corporation should rely on SSO. Then two, as much as possible, do not use passwords anymore. So, and use U2F, pass keys. So authenticate with your device. And when you do that, you unfortunately have to manage recovery keys, because if you lose your device, you lose your access. So get as much as you can, pass keys and recovery keys. So to that end, I think password managers like KeePassXC, or those that are leveraged locally and then backed up on a cloud drive are the best, I think. If you don't feel that's too complex for you, feel free to use third-party password managers website. But I don't think eventually even them will get compromised. So I think that's the two main. And the other one is protect your runtime for your machine. So as much as you can, be careful about Windows. I think it's a bit easier if you're on Mac or Chrome OS or Linux as an end user. And that works for employees, employees of a corporation or end user. It's true in both ends. Microsoft is making an effort, but still most exploits always target Windows and Excel. And I think that's kind of a key problem that's related to those platforms. If you're using kind of a Mac or Linux, you're using online on Microsoft 365, or if you're on the Google stack, Google Workspace, using web versions, so you're not executing it. Because I think that's the core issue when you're using zips, and is you're executing applications that run locally. And if you don't do that anymore, a lot of the phishing problems go away. But that doesn't remove credentials and clicking and leaking your password. So that's why the passkey and U2F kind of fixes that other part of the problem. And I think third, we're not talking about that part yet, is malicious employees. For large corporations and governments, this is becoming a much bigger problem with remote work. And for that part, you have to kind of isolate your environments and do what we're doing in platform engineering to make sure that developers don't touch stuff that shouldn't be touched on a regular basis. And and in terms of DNS, I'd really advise corporations and governments start monitoring the number of third parties managing your client data, because they only do manage a new one and get +1, and they don't manage how many have been included over time. And big corporations sometimes have over 500 third parties managing their client data. And I think there's one rule that would force big corporations into a better situation, is start actually reducing that number to, let's say, less than 100 or less than 200, because it's not normal for them, when you have business styles acquiring tools, to have tens of each for each tool, and have all their competitors in large corporations, because they want to test all of them, and we think that the new one will solve their problem. It's often not the case. How did you get to your situation if you were doing things better in the first place? So I think that's kind of a key, is think a bit better about what can solve the core issue, and then teach them afterwards, after you've kind of done your technical effort. Because I think people have been hiding behind the fact you have to teach your end users. But even myself, or security experts, extremely well-crafted AI phishing, when you're at a dinner or you're doing something, you might get caught. And that's from somebody who's been phishing people, right, 10 years ago. If you do more than 2,000 people, we had 99% success rate. Almost always one person is going to click. And so at scale, from an attacker's perspective, it's always winning with phishing. So the only defense is to improve the technology used by the users. That's the only time where we saw people actually succeeding in defense, is when there's no longer passwords, just SSO, and that device can't execute. So even if the user clicks, the attacker doesn't get much. And so I think, it's about improving the global situation and global position in procurement. Don't get as many third parties. If you do, get a centralized way to manage your employee or user authentication. And then for your APIs, there's a kind of a security of APIs problem to make sure that there's not just pen tests, but they're sane in the way they're managed. The authorization is managed properly and stuff like that when you're getting a solution from a third party. I think those are the main reasons why we see exploits, because all of them are failing. So end user authentication with passwords, they end up leaking. Your admins end up leaking, so that's a problem. If you had SSO, that would be less likely and better managed. And on the custom services part, I think almost always when we audit platforms or clients or APIs, authorization is almost not well done. So we always see issues. So on that, there's a trend now called authorization engine that helps groups that are leveraging it, but it's still like, I'd say maybe 80% of the APIs have major authorization problems. And what I mean by authorization is like you authenticate as a user and you authenticate another user, but my user is allowed to query your information. That's authorization, different from authentication. And I think that's kind of, those three problems are the biggest, and they're being addressed if you're and new development groups or groups making effort in order to reduce that at scale. But a lot of the groups, they don't focus on trying to improve the situation globally, and they focus trying to push kind of a onus on the end user. And I think that's not fair, because some groups are succeeding. It's not security is always bad for large corporations. How often do you see Google, Microsoft get completely compromised? I mean,
That's a really good point, Ashley. Really good point. I wanted to speak to Jennifer and your point. Jennifer, for the education piece, and you, Ashley, for the isolation, the need for isolation. And because I was one of those, I've taken the cybersecurity, Ashley, I've taken that training where you had the little, the gamification. They're trying all sorts of ways to get folks to understand the importance, but there's a disconnect still. I acknowledge that. How do we get the technical cybersecurity teams and the non-technical business units to really understand that these gateways are implemented through leadership? So how do we ensure leadership across all functions where we understand this importance to implement it in the strategies? And Ashley, to your point, affecting the individual, and Jennifer throughout the organization, because that's where it starts.
It does. And you already just said it's the leadership, it's the tone at the top. So oftentimes what I see at organizations, mostly the larger federal agencies, of course, since that's where I work, including mine, it has to start with the executive committee who we train to understand the importance of how not having the critical cybersecurity mission intertwined in the various critical areas of your organization will cause more harm than good. Also, using some of the critical examples that are impacting the world even. There have been a lot of different examples that have rang loud for us this fiscal year or this calendar year even. Across the world, we have the healthcare industry that has been impacted very tremendously. K through 12 organizations, the financial sector has been impacted, the federal government, and private businesses as well. And using some of those very catastrophic examples, because no one wants to be made an example in the public eye, but using some of those very real case studies to, explain the what is, and then highlight the impact to the infrastructure, because what's also very critical in those explanations when we're identifying the indicator of compromise and then helping them to understand how those organizations perhaps mitigated the damage to what happened. All of those events, even if it's a ransomware attack, all of them were different stories, different scenarios. So we're painting the picture of the what is and the potential impact. And that helps leaders to understand how it could impact their own environment. So with there, you're able to then paint this roadmap of where your particular organization needs to go with different opportunities and different stakeholders and investors on board to streamline what needs to come next for your environment. You have to bring in your legal team. Your legal team needs to understand the ramifications of what if this happens to me? What are my next steps? What if this happens and it's not just a regular cyber incident? What if folks' personally identifiable information is compromised? What are my next steps to letting folks understand and be notified of their personally identifiable information was compromised, and they need to be presented with identification verification services so that they can be additionally protected? You need to bring in your budget folks, your accounting folks, so that they can understand how much additional monies that you may need for your emergency preparedness services. Because what we see out here is there's no clear definitive timeline or a criteria that says with your IT budgets, there's a cybersecurity line item. What we see generically, most organizations give about 10% of their IT budgets to cyber. And that's give or take, depending on the criticality of your businesses. But there's no clear criteria that says it has to be 10, it can be 5, it can be 15, it can be 20. But what we have seen is, of course, once there has been an incident or an attack, you somehow increase those opportunities. But what we do is bring in the budget folks to understand that once there's an attack, we may need to move around some emergency funds to quickly mitigate some of the concerns. Or if there's new directives and policies, we may need to reprioritize funding to make sure that we get new tools and technologies in place to help us take our security controls to that next level. So those types of things when you're working from the top, because it's not always just the security folks that understand the inner workings of your environment. You have to have all of the leadership to understand the what is and the impact. And that's where it really starts. And that's what's really been helpful for a lot of the organizations. And then you have to share your information across the different organizations. If you're a small business or if you're a larger organization, there's always someone that has a similar business practice of you, or there's someone else that may have been impacted by some kind of compromise, such as you, or maybe it was an insider compromise of some sort. So sharing this information, having a community where you can just explain cyber vulnerabilities or what you've seen across the impact, and streamlining some of what you've done quickly would help the next organization to say, okay, I've been hit by a ransom attack. They'll quickly more so know what to do than to just freeze when it happens, because they just didn't have that knowledge. So that information sharing community has been becoming increasingly more important in this time period.
Oh, that's good stuff. So I do want to shift here quickly into more of kind of preventing these cyber attacks. So, and Ashley, I'll throw this to you. What are some of the warning signs that a business or organization should be looking for to know that they're at risk of being attacked or that they've already been compromised?
So usually you're going to, when you have attackers starting looking at your APIs, you're going to start seeing a lot of errors, because they're going to start spamming your external visibility endpoints. And before doing dedicated attacks to your employees, that's usually the modus operandi of those large groups. They try to probe directly your APIs without noticing or doing anything. If they don't get anything because you've been developing and securing correctly your external endpoints, then usually they start pivoting to your employees, and that's where it gets very difficult, because depending on your employee, your operation structure, if you're kind of a flat network, flat execution, and your admin is admin of everything, that's where ransomware gets absolutely deadly. Or because the attacker targets your admins and tries to get control of what that admin has. And in most corporations that don't work with segregation in mind, they get control of everything that way. And so I think that there needs to be a bigger understanding that your crown jewels, and when you're doing procurement, those core assets are updated over time, and the architecture is updated to be better over time. But I think large groups are like, oh, this is a core jewel that was developed 25 years ago. Why is it okay to only allocate operational budget to it and not completely redo it? I think that's kind of a problem that we see, is a lot of the stacks, developers are doing their best, operations people are doing their best, but it's the leadership not doing any effort to make the crown jewels survive their tech debt. And And I'm unfortunate, but the big governments or biggest culprits of that, or big corporations, they never do any effort to update something that's been working for 25 years on mainframes, on the S400s and other platforms. Why isn't that redeveloped if it's such core to your data and your end user flows? You want to get AI? Why don't you focus on reducing tech debt first? And I think that perspective, when you start getting it, that tech debt is something that really exists, then you start reducing the number of security issues, because most problems are related to older stacks, stuff that can't be updated at all. And so if you can't update in a matter of weeks your applicative, your network, your containers, there needs to be effort to update the technology, because that's the biggest issue often that we see. Stuff that gets hacked is stuff from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago in terms of development, and often they can't even afford, or they don't have a license to update it. So I think it's really procurement and crown jewel management. Once you do start focusing on those two, that's how, that's what we're doing when working with banks here in North America or in Canada, is you focus on your crown jewel where a lot of the client information is, put effort to put it up to date, reduce the number of vulnerabilities, and then after you're done with the best you can do in terms of patching, then you have to start thinking about redoing or re-implementing. And because those are your crown jewels. And I think that second step never happens. Once you're done patching, they're like, oh, we can't do anything about that. That's an old version of Java. We can't do anything about it. So we're going to keep it as is until something gets hacked. And it just takes time. And I think that second part of the effort, as the public or the government should require from your tech providers, and even internally, about budgeting. If something goes too far out of date, there should be a process in order to bring it back to an updatable status.
Yeah, it just seems like generally people are more reactive. It's a lower budget number until something happens, and then all of a sudden now we're on the cybersecurity train when we should really be on there. Hopefully, one of the takeaways is we get on the cybersecurity train before something bad happens. This is just such an important thing as far as the warning signs. Jennifer, I want to throw the same question to you. What other warning signs should people be looking for?
To be honest, the warning signs are all over, to be honest. I see them. I wake up daily and I read news, cyber related news. And I know that's probably boring, but cyber is my passion, right? And I'm not trying to make it everyone else's passion, and it should be. But good cyber hygiene and us being good, responsible tech citizens does go a long way. Many of us sit in our homes with smart devices connected every single place there can be, right? And just at the face value of understanding what cyber is and how it can impact us really can then instill us to have good, safe business practices in our everyday lives for our organizations. And for me, I just read about what's happening in the communities for the events that we may not even hear about. Like just a couple months ago, there was a rural hospital, I believe it was in Iowa, that was hit by a ransom attack. And usually when you hear about ransom attacks, you hear about them. And, unfortunately, we make it public that folks pay the ransom. And you don't really hear about the after effects of what happens, because what happens is those malicious actors, they could give you your data back or they couldn't. And there's a side effect and repercussion to your organization if that happens. Now, hopefully you have good alternative backups and such where you can recover from such an event. But what if you do not? And this rural hospital was not able to recover after the ransom attack, and they had to shut down. And now, because they were in such a critical position, they're now having to route patients with critical needs and critical care to different areas, which is really impacting the community. It's impacting other small businesses, like just the food industry and other types of areas that were, making their business based on the needs of that hospital in that area. So it has a supply chain effect to that enterprise, to that city. And reading some of those stories really just provide that impact as to, wow, this could happen in other areas. So the early indicators really can come from just reading and becoming more knowledgeable. I know that there are several different types of literature out there. Obviously, I read more federal news, but there's Washington Post and all types of things that give you these informative ways to just stay connected and stay advanced as to what is to come. SANS and Microsoft definitely have some bulletins and alerts of what to stay advanced of. There's always something from OPM and the White House that just says, hey, these are the things that you should be considering for just your basic in-home security control needs. I even see people who get in-home Wi-Fi and they're still using the passwords that are written on the bottom of their Wi-Fi service from Xfinity or Bell South, and then you wonder why your information is compromised.
Are we not supposed to do that, Jennifer?
That's
You
not a
are
problem.
not supposed to.
Hey, I'm
So
asking for a
Are
friend.
you telling on yourself right now? So
I'm just asking for a friend right now. Okay.
No, okay. If you asking for this friend, tell your friend after this live session to go change their password. And to make their password very complex, and use even two-factor authentications. I have friends and family, and I'm sure you all do as well, who are constantly getting their information compromised on their social media accounts. And some of them, or some of us, are using the same passwords in their banking, their social media, their Gmails, all types of things, their Amazons. And then when they get compromised, they're wondering how my identity is being compromised. How do I have a house all the way out in Alaska and I've never been to Alaska? Well, your information was easily retrieved once they compromised this one account. So using even two-factor authentication modules, there are different authenticators out there. We have Okta, we have Google Translator. You can literally go on your Google Play Store or your Apple. I don't really have an Apple, so I don't know what the Apple is. The Apple Play Store? Forgive me for that. But go on there and look at two-factor authentication models and use something. Use a two-factor model to really nail down or restrict how a malicious actor would be able to compromise even your identity, even your passwords. And there's just little things that you could do to really secure your environments, antivirus protections. Even with the antivirus protections, they're not just doing virus scanning and virus protections anymore. They're scanning the dark web. They're doing all types of other vulnerability scanning on your machines now to make sure that the websites that you're going to, if they're not safe and secure, that you're not, clicking on the different links and opening up additional vulnerabilities in your environment that you don't want to welcome. So there's all types of things that you can be looking for that could be early indicators, like run those scans. I even have a virus authenticator on my phone. I run the scan every single day because I'm always scrolling and clicking on things. And I know most people don't have an authenticator on their phone, but your phone literally goes with you everywhere. And it's your most trusted resource, but it's a mini computer. Well, it's not even mini at this point. It's a computer. You need to make sure that it's safe and secure and protective of all your data.
So let me jump in a little bit. So, Jennifer, I hear you, and I can just imagine your friends and family, right? Like they're probably hearing you, and they're like, Jennifer, we're not trying to do all that. Like how do I don't know how to do all. I don't know how to do all that. Like, how do I set up a multi-factor authentication? How do I do these scans of my devices? And I do real estate, right? I mean, what do you say to those individuals that family and friends that when you start coming, oh, here go Jennifer again. Let me, she's gonna ask me if I change that password on my I'm just glad that I can stream and watch whatever I'm watching. Like, I mean, what do you say to them?
Thanksgivings I don't enjoy going to because everybody want to ask me. I got this device question. I'm like, can I eat first?
I just want some macaroni and
Is
cheese.
the
That's what the
food
macaroni and cheese.
ready? Well, I bring the macaroni. I'm the macaroni person, so I have been certified in that area as well.
All right,
Which
all
is
right.
important, But yeah, other than my mom and dad, I will go to them because that's different. They're in their 70s. I give a little bit more grace there, it's different. But I definitely have educational conversations with my friends and family because, it's needed. I don't want them out there, making these mistakes. But I see it all the time. I see friends and family on Facebook all the time, and they're like, oops, I've been got. And I'm like, you didn't do what I asked you to do. You didn't change those passwords, did you? You didn't use that extra authentication, that multi-layer that I asked. And your password was password 123 without the extra characters and the upper and lower and some other things, or did you use the same password everywhere? And I know it's difficult because it's a lot. We have all types of accounts and lockdown measures, but again, also explaining to them, and unfortunately, even the individual user, much like a large enterprise, large business, it's unfortunately not until you've been compromised yourself that you start to get it, you know? And unfortunately, I think it was back a few years ago when most people who were shopping at Target during the December holiday season were compromised and understood, hey, this really can, attack and happen to all of us, where we start to see it more. That UPS link got a lot of folks earlier this year. Well, those phishing links that are coming to you. I know early COVID, those PPP or PPE links or the vaccines are ready. That was getting a lot of people. So really just having to break down the why this is important and the impact. I think it was helpful. Folks didn't understand the password. Oh, it was coming. Xfinity sent it to me. It should be legit. No, I mean, it is legit.
Mhm.
But let me explain to you why we need to increase the security of this a little bit more. So it really is just a explanation of things. And it's fun now to see them explain it to other people. Each one teach one. Because it starts with us. It really does. But cyber is for everyone. It really is. I even have folks that are now trying to get certificates and study more about, not even to really get in the field, but to understand it more, to just be knowledgeable in the space and just be informed, because we're on devices every day. And it just be helpful to just be cognizant of how we're walking through life, being digitally connected.
Yeah, those are all great points.
Who's
And
going
the whole
and who's
thing about
gonna and who's
yeah,
gonna be
go ahead.
more concerned about your personal data than you,
Right.
right? And
Absolutely.
protecting your own personal data.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
But
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's kind of the biggest takeaway from an end user is really use a password manager. If you're not using a password manager, use your browser-based password storage. But one of the worst things you can do is have the same password across multiple services, because one of them leaks, basically attackers are going to start spraying it across all your services with your email, and so they're going to start breaking things. And that's actually one of the biggest ways personally people get attacked or leak by scammers. So really, really make sure, if you're not using password manager, use like kind of your browser on Edge or Chrome or Safari to remember your passwords and put different ones per platform. That's kind of, if you don't do one thing, do that. And then if you can do and not use passwords, use the new passkeys method in browsers. That would be the other even better. And then even after that is kind of use recovery. Once you're done with recovery, that's kind of a best situation, because then even if you lose access or you lose your phone, you lose your laptop, you don't completely lose access to your emails, because usually that's the problem, is your main authentication. And on the, I think the corporate side, what does a corporation or small company that's been operating for a few years can do to improve their security position? One is look at their third parties and sometimes the compliance of third parties to make sure that at least what they have is well managed. And two is regular pen tests. That's the kind of the best thing you can do, is mandate someone to do an external, test of what's exposed to the internet, and then what's exposed to the end users. That's kind of always the first step. Then you start digging into your crown jewels, but that's the kind of the 3 steps. But really, really, the first most important one is don't reuse passwords, because that's kind of the main method. Even I'm not talking about corporations here. You personally, for your own data, your own Gmail, Hotmail. Don't reuse passwords. That's the main way people get attacked now.
Great point. I've got a couple of takeaways so far. Number one, you need good cyber hygiene, right? You should ask yourself, do you have good cyber hygiene, like Jennifer mentioned? And then from Ashley, and Jennifer mentioned this too, don't have every password be password 123 and then get surprised that everybody's hacking into your stuff. I think the password manager piece is a great idea. It's not one that we haven't necessarily heard before, but we need to put that in place at this point. I think this is critical. Janelle, I can see you leaning forward. I know you want to get into this conversation. Go ahead, Janelle. What?
Oh, absolutely. Again, just from the small business perspective, we don't think we're targeted for any cybersecurity threats because we're on a small scale. The government's protected. They have huge IT teams and integrations, but what would you recommend when cybersecurity frameworks, it seems really intimidating and expensive for even a startup to small businesses? A cybersecurity framework that prevents potential compromises regardless of their sizes. I love the password protection information, and I love the the phishing emails and training, but the gateway in my world comes through training and development. So what role does employee training play in preventing these cyber attacks for small and mid businesses to create an effective education program with limited budget and resources for listeners out there who are just, it's intimidating. When you say cybersecurity framework, we need to know what role does this training play upon startup as a prevention method?
Yeah, Ashley, want to take it first? If not, I can.
Yeah. So I think from a small, if you're owner of a small corporation, or cyber hygiene first. So no password, SSO as much as you can, because then it removes you on the password need. So that's one. Two is prevent kind of direct attacks, or prevent attacks on what you already manage. So that would be the second step. So secure what you already have and make what is making you money. And I think third is what compliance tries to do, but compliance doesn't do it well because it's super expensive, I think, is there are some OWASP guidelines, there are some certain public references now about what can you do as a corporation as a baseline. And I think that it's not usually that hard. It is, like we said, cyber hygiene, external perimeter, so the test for external perimeter, and then try to make sure that you kind of isolate your zones of administrative management. So, like your CMS as a manager should be different from your payment systems, from your banking. So if one gets compromised, that's kind of a big third group, is what we're doing, segregation. So if something gets compromised, it doesn't compromise everything. But that's really, really hard. That's why you need platform engineering and automation to help you. It's basically impossible to do manually. And once you start doing that, you're going to realize, even if you're a really big group, you can compromise only small portions at a time. And if you follow the good isolation and segregation, and then you don't compromise the entire thing. And so groups that are, for example, having ransomware across their entire company usually means they haven't updated their architecture and methodology to be really more segregated per business line, per project. And that's new. I mean, that's kind of a reaction to the waves of attacks and wave of compromises. It's because in the past, let's say 10 years ago, we were relying on Windows domains and it was that kind of flat network. This is no longer done that way now in the cloud. Everything is more isolated per pod. We call it hub and spoke architecture. So if you're looking in depth, I'm talking here, if there are developers listening to us, kind of that's the new gen thing for cloud-based, is really, if something gets compromised, better not leave where it is. And unless they compromise employees or high-level admins. And that's really, really one big thing. And the other one is, I think, people not on the radar, in procurement, please make effort to make sure that you're maintaining whatever you have. Make sure your crown jewels are safe. As a corporation, you should always try to secure that what has the most client data usually. And for that part, there's no silver bullet. It's just maturity. That's what makes you better, is just solution maturity, and that's hard to do. How you're managing your accounts, how you're managing your third parties, how many third parties do you have. That part you can't generally give super really good advice. Is usually one of the best advice is less is more. Less third party is better, because less moving parts mean you can better focus on it, better update, and you don't have to spend like hundreds of hours every week, every month. Oh, that third party got compromised. Oh, that other third party got compromised. Oh, that third party got compromised. And I think that's what people are focusing on more so now, is kind of reducing the number of SaaS. And I think that's where the value gets from cloud providers, is they allow you to, as opposed to it's on-premise, to do more easy integrations now and reduce the third-party SaaSes. Because people say, oh, SaaS is on-premise is always better. Yeah, on-premise, and how many SaaSes are you using? And that's kind of a dichotomy. On-premise is always more secure. Yes, but how many SaaSes are you using on top of your on-premise compared to a better internally managed cloud implementation? And I think that's kind of a transition we're observing, is a lot of value in cloud providers is in the way you can manage and integrate AI workloads now, big analytic workloads efficiently in the cloud. Yes, it's often expensive, but your security posture ends up being better when it's kind of centralized in one or two or three clouds. And I think that multi-cloud position is easy to be said, very hard to be done. I've seen it more often than not, someone on one or two, not three. It's too hard to do three completely automated. And so I think my key takeaways, hygiene is always the best first, because security is not, it's step by step. If you fail at one, there's no point in doing 2, 3, 4, 5. If your password is bad and has your first name, last name, and date of birth in it, I can attack you even knowing who you are, if we get to brute force. So I think that's really key for secrets. And even more, if you want to do crypto, I have big advice. Anyone who has cryptocurrency or crypto assets, your hygiene is top priority, because then you're going to start losing your crypto if somebody attacks you. So you can't even think about having crypto if you don't have good personal cyber hygiene.
No, this is awesome. Thank you, Ashley. So there is hope for the small business community and midsize as well. So it sounds like a centralized, segmented cloud storage, creating those gateways so they can't, just attack and compromise you across the board. So thank you for that. And Jennifer, I'd like to direct that same question to you as well. You handle big government, so how would you streamline that to smaller segments?
So the cybersecurity framework is massive. I actually enjoy it. I didn't think I would at first, because there's a lot of federal initiatives that come out, and we're just always overwhelmed with how to take what's new and streamline it to be effective across what it is we've already started to implement. But the framework really does focus on those 5 different segments that we really need to streamline across our various environments. Really looking at how we're identifying and detecting, protecting, responding, and recovering to various cybersecurity control elements that we need to strategize for to, again, safeguard our data. It goes back to the mission criticality and the safeguarding of the data. And even for small businesses, everybody has data for your organizations that you find they're your critical assets. And you want to make sure that they are upheld to the standards for your organization, for the betterment of your business, for your customers. And with that, it's oftentimes where, if this is not your specialty, then you may need to hire a third-party assessment to assist you. And this is sometimes, small businesses, you may not have the funds. And there are grants out there, especially from the federal government and other private firms alike, and even nonprofits, that will assist you in helping you to protect your enterprise. There are opportunities for you to assist in getting those additional cybersecurity practices. So from my lens, it's twofold. It's the protecting of your network. And Ashley was right. When you protect that network from the outside in, if the network was built and there are segmentation and segregation of controls, then if you are compromised by a malicious actor, or even if you have a malicious intruder, that those individuals, whether it's an entity or an individual itself, they can only get so far with the access that they have, kind of thwarted into your environment because of the limited segmentation they're able to receive. And that's where that cyber vulnerability, that penetration into your environment can be stopped. So it may not even cripple your full environment. If you have a ransomware, they were only able to get into a third of what your enterprise is. They're not going to bring you all the way down, crippling you to your knees, where you're not able to conduct any services, because we're able to stop them in their tracks at that corner of that third, where that 2/3 was already network segmented out, and we're able to provide the controls and block them from getting further into the navigation of your controls. Now, where the people come in at with the cybersecurity awareness and the additional training, that helps us to be able to further see and know what to do, what to say, how to manage these types of things. Now, granted, things can come in from phishing and other Trojan attacks and SQL ejections and all types of different scenarios with the people. But it's just mainly important for the people to just realize, hey, if I see something, I say something, especially with insider threat awareness. Some of us may have folks that are not as ethical in our business practices, and we need to make sure that we realize we need to report such individuals, such practices, and know who to report those to. If we start to see that our system is running a certain way, if we're getting certain alerts, if the keyboard may have awareness on it and it's not working as intended, of if there's a login control that's missing, or if you're getting that blue screen of death, who do I report this to? That's where that awareness training comes in at. So coupled with that third-party assessor that you may have to bring in with your education training, combine, you strengthen your cyber hygiene for your organization.
Let me get a step in real quick on this. One thing, Jennifer, we hear about this whole thing around zero trust.
Yes.
Like what is zero trust in a kind of for the layman out here, right? What is zero trust? What are the things that should be considered in zero trust? Is that, because you hear these big, these words, these buzzwords, and then people are thinking, okay, zero trust, AI, okay, what can you share on those topics?
So good thing, and with us kind of just talking about the network segmentation and segregation, we were kind of alluding to some of that zero trust. So zero trust is a security model that's based on the principle of maintaining those strict access controls, and again, just not trusting anyone and everyone by default, even those that are already inside our network perimeter. So ordinarily, what we've been doing is there's so much power in those of us that have the ability to authenticate into our networks every single day. We have a PIF card, an RSA token, or any kind of authentication access to log in to your business services. But what zero trust is going to do is we're going to remove the security controls at the perimeter layer, at that outside firewall layer. And we're going to now add additional security controls at every single attribute layer within your environment. So even if you, Ted, authenticate into your environment, we're going to continuously validate who you are and who you say you are throughout your session all day long. So as you then try to authenticate into various servers or various systems and applications, you are in fact needing to access those. You are still Ted Fails. You then need to still have this access to this system and that system and that system. So we're continuously verifying that you have the access, and we're going to continually verify and make sure that those security attributes are continuously safe and secure. From that, we're going to be able to continuously be able to identify any malicious movement, any malicious actors. And therefore, if an attack comes, and it's not an if, it's a when. So we can't just prevent all cyber attacks, right? They're going to happen. It is what it is. But we can limit the voluminous nature of what they do to our environment. So that's where that implementation comes in. So if we get attacked, if we get hacked, maybe they'll only get in and get into that firewall, but we can cut them off at the hello and they won't get to see anything. And that's what Zero Trust is going to allow. It's going to allow us to put more restrictions into our security controls at every attribute layer in the nexus.
Thank you. Thank you for
It's not,
sharing that,
it's
Jim.
not about as
Go
much
ahead,
the
Ash.
end user, but it's about system for Zero Trust. Like when a system talks to another one, it's restricted to only the table and things that it should have access to. And usually in operations, when you're connecting to a database, you could use an account that is admin of all the databases for that one service when there are 10 services. And that's not part of a Zero Trust model. Zero Trust model is really, you should only be accessing exactly what you need, nothing more. And that's why it's a key enabler in the segregation and defense in depth. If you're doing defense in depth and you're doing the isolation, you absolutely need Zero Trust part of your model so that you can't break boundaries. Basically, it boundarizes everything to the least amount of thing needed. And that's why it's kind of a bit newer on the newer side. And also, I think we didn't talk about it much, is containers. We should move as much as we can to more containers and less servers. Because if you use a server model, it's that kind of one thing, one runtime doing everything, and it doesn't scale well. Whereas if you do containers, it scales better, more isolated per need, per service, but it is hard. The problem with containers is it's expensive in order to make developers understand it. It's getting better compared to, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago, but it is the key enabler to have a large amount of segregation is containers, but it also forces you to have a better development maturity as a group and better maintenance. But it is the key. Once you start going really well on containers, you start having less security headaches and more deployment capabilities and redeploying like 10 times, 20 times, 50 times per week.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. This has been a fantastic episode. Just a lot of great information has come out of this. As we bring this to a close, I want both of our panelists to kind of share the best ways that people can connect with them if they have questions or they want to take advantage of your services, bring you in to speak, that type of thing. So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
LinkedIn is probably the easiest. Email, it'll get lost in the translation of all the things that I have going on right now. My mission with the election season upon us and me working for our leaders of Congress, it's a busy season. So LinkedIn, I'm always available to connect and look forward to, making additional conversations. I also do some other professional development areas. I'm doing an AGA event soon, and we're bringing back the soft skills and talking about situation awareness. And I love talking about those types of skills as well, because it's needed. We're in this virtual environment. I've been in person all week at conferences, but, making sure that people also understand that, how we're showing up in other capacities is beneficial too. So thanks for having me.
Excellent. Excellent. We'll put your LinkedIn information in the show notes. Ashley?
If you have, small questions or good patterns, questions personally on LinkedIn, or if you want digital transformation or platform engineering, Pivotal website, pvotl.tech, TECH for our website, and there you can always reference us. There would be, all the others to how to contact us.
Fantastic. And then as we close, something just came to mind. So for our two panelists, if you could just leave everybody with one final challenge based off of today's episode about having good cyber hygiene and some of the other things we talk about. So Jennifer, we'll start with you. What's a final challenge you want to leave with the people today?
Final challenge. Let's see. Okay. Go look at all of your passwords to where you're making purchases. So just personally, start with the personal stuff. Then we can do the business stuff later, right? So your personal. So look at your Amazons, Look at your PayPal accounts, your Cash App accounts. Look at your banking, your Gmails is important, but look at where your credit card information is, and just double check to make sure that they're not the same passwords in every single place. And consider adding rather a multi-factor authentication to those services so that you'll be duly protected in the event something happens.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
That's great. Ashley?
It's pretty much the same advice, except I would go one step on top. If you protect your main email in Google Drive even further, because all the recoveries go to that main email, and usually people don't have that many main emails. So make sure that one specifically uses two-factor, or passkeys, that because they're usually supported for the top level email providers. So that's the biggest thing, because even if you have one single password different for every website, like a good security aware person, if your main email gets compromised, they get to reset it because they controlled your main email and completely recompromise everything from there. So that's the main kind of nexus, is your main email for recoveries, or your phone number. And yeah, if you can, two-factor is better, but my main recommendation now is remove passwords where you can. And two, don't use or execute stuff or scripts. This is the way people do phishing, for the phishing to actually take hold on a machine. So that's runtime security. So don't send like an Excel or spreadsheet or other files to other people. Use, if you can, web pages or web services. They're actually better for security purposes. And I think that's about it. Otherwise, I think new gen tools are coming in terms of platform engineering that are going to simplify a lot of the operations of small companies. Like the one we're doing, where it does the segregation for you, does the cloud segregation for you. And it's coming, not just us, but I mean, as a general theme, it's becoming more of a hold now, because we're realizing that even small to medium corporations want to have those. And the automation is getting more mature. So a new generation of tools is going to be coming to simplify operations of a company in the cloud.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing those challenges. Again, thank you for Jennifer Franks. Thank you to Ashley Monraj. This concludes this month's episode of Coffee and Conversation. And until next time, have a great one.